Welcome to the Conscious Combat Club, trauma-informed martial arts by women, for women. I'm your host Georgia, and I cannot wait to go on this journey with you. Please note that some listeners might find this content distressing. Take care, connect with your support networks, and refer to the organisations in the show notes below. Happy New Year, happy 2025. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so sorry for the hiatus that we took in 2024. It is always my intention to be bringing these podcasts to you. They are one of my favorite things to do. And I certainly hope that in this year we'll be able to deliver particularly a lot more positive news stories, like stories of people in martial arts who are doing amazing things in this amazing community, which I think feels very doable this year. One of the reasons why the podcast dropped off was because we became a registered charity towards the start of 2024 was when we officially got the tick from the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, which was huge and a huge amount of work. And there's a lot of people to thank for that. One of the things that it did mean was that we pivoted some of our time into grant writing because we now qualify for a lot more grants. And that's what today's episode is about the first grant that we've been awarded, which is through the Con Irwin Sub-Fund at the Victorian Women's Trust, where we will be delivering 50 full scholarships for women and gender diverse people impacted by gendered violence this year to do trauma-informed kickboxing. So this is a really big deal, and I wanted to have Hilary Irwin on to talk about the Con Irwin Sub-Fund. So I hope that you'll find this conversation as just delightful as I did. I think it's so beautiful to speak with other feminists. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then please tune in to hear more about the scholarships. And if it's too long, didn't read for you, and you just want to go straight to try and access one of those scholarships and you're based in Melbourne, all you need to do is go to our website via the show notes, join the waitlist, and we'll be in touch to help see which day of the week is going to suit you better. And so I hope you enjoy this episode or the program if you're hearing about this scholarship for the first time now, and that might work for you. Love you all. Hilary, thank you so much for meeting with me. I'm so excited to learn more about the Con Irwin Sub-Fund. Can we start there maybe? What are the objectives of the Con Irwin Sub-Fund with the Vic Women's Trust?
Sure, Georgia, and I'm delighted to be doing this because it seems to me that Conscious Combat does some wonderful and groundbreaking things. So it's terrific. Georgia, the objectives or the purposes of the sub-fund are I'm taking them from exactly what it says. They're to offer circuit-breaking solutions to long-term problems of discrimination against women and girls, violence against women and children, and equality of educational opportunity. So, the Conscious Combat program fits right in there. And I think what I really like about the purposes of this sub-fund are the emphasis on groundbreaking solutions. So it means the sub-fund can go a bit off field. It can do some really interesting things that maybe some other organisations don't do, like the Conscious Combat program.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it was established by Con Irwin. Who was she and why did she establish the fund?
No, well, it wasn't actually, Georgia. Con Irwin is my mother,
Yes.
and she died quite a long time ago. And after a few years, I just started thinking that I was involved with some of the work of the Victorian Women's Trust by then, and I was starting to do a bit of donating, and I was a volunteer. It was just, I think it's a terrific organisation. And I was thinking I would like to do something that remembered my mother. Like a lot of families in the past, this was a 50s family when my brother and I were growing up. What it was the way it was, it's the way it still is, like, in lots of ways, that men were much more recognised in what they were doing than women, and yet the huge role that my mother had in running the family and doing everything related to that, and doing a lot of volunteer work, doing some really terrific stuff came up. So I had a word to Mary Crooks, who's the executive director of the trust, and said, would it be possible for me maybe to donate to a program that and do it in the name of my mother, so that it's a remembrance thing. And that coincided with the fact that I didn't know this at the time, but Mary had been thinking about ways that grants from women into the Victorian Women's Benevolent Trust, because that's what all the sub-funds are funded through, because it's tax deductible, how that could go on in perpetuity and not always rely on grants year by year by year. So I think her phrase was, or her sentence was, we might be able to do something a bit bigger than that. There had been one sub-fund set up already, actually, by the trust, with involvement with the family. So that's how, and I knew I couldn't run a funding round anyway. It's not something that I could do, but I really liked the idea of celebrating my mum through that way of doing that. And so that's how it arose. It was the second sub-fund, and there are now 17, Georgia, sub-funds with all sorts of different purposes. So, yeah.
It's incredible. How long has it been running for?
It started in, I think 2008, 2009. I should have looked that up specifically. Just wonder if there's a date.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So coming up to 20 years of the Con Irwin Sub-Fund?
Yes, indeed, and lots of different programs and different things. It's been very exciting. They're all community-based programs. You know how the application process works because you've done it.
Yes.
And, they've been exciting. But the decision about all of the sub-funds, Georgia, is actually made by the Victorian Women's Benevolent Trust. It's made by the board, and it's made by a subcommittee who has a look at all of the funds. And what they do at that stage is they also send the information to any of those donors who have set up sub-funds. Just say, would you like to have some input? What would you like? What do you think? What is your idea of what would be the best grant? And sometimes that's a talk it through with the funds manager or with Mary. And I don't think we've had any disagreements about that. There was absolute agreement about the funding for conscious combat. And so, that's how it works. But I don't actually make the final decision. But it's a negotiation, Georgia. We haven't had any conflict about that. So it's been good. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. I'd love to hear about some of the past grant recipients. You remember who had it last year and what they did with it, or are there any over the last nearly 20 years that have stood out to you?
Sure. What stood out is a hard question, but I can talk about a few of them. George, I talk about the last year's program.
Yes.
Also, the reports come back to the donors after reports from the sub-funds that you people submit come back to the donors. So if they want, they don't have to, but if they want, they're getting the feedback about what's happened, what the sub-fund does. So this is the latest one I've had from last year's grant, which was a research project, and again it's circuit breaking. I think that is the definition of why this worked for this sub-fund. It's looking at Victorian women's deaths by suicide, and it's a research project that looks at understanding the histories and the contributing factors of family violence suicide, and with the aim, obviously, of informing better responses and early intervention and things that can be done about that. And I think that's a program that hasn't been done before. Research hasn't been done before. Yeah, it's the first dedicated Victorian study, because I think probably suicides and family violence as a contributing factor.
Yeah.
Well, they haven't been looked at before, and very much, you're right in the thick of it, of this absolute epidemic of violence that we're having at the moment. Anything that can help with addressing that. So what we did, it was a project between 3 universities. ACU, chief investigator was from Monash University, and also chief investigator also from Melbourne University. And so what they had a look at was they analysed the coronial findings relating to deaths in women, and they did that over a 10-year period. So it was quite a period that they covered, and that was phase 1 that's been done. All phases have been done, actually. And phase 2 was 21 in-depth interviews with Victorian coroners and other people, such as family violence review people involved in the process of family violence deaths, to just try and understand the way in which family violence is explored or not, probably during the coronial court process, and to identify opportunities for policies and law changes. And the second phase, which has also been done, third phase, was a thematic analysis of what's happened. So the final report, I think, is about to be released. I'll love to see it, but it's it's 3 eminent universities. It is such a valuable thing to have done, and again, hasn't been done before. So that was the last one, and gee, the other ones, Georgia. Look, when I was talking to Mary about just tell you the podcast, Mary Crooks, who's the executive director, that I was doing the podcast today, and I said, I don't know how I'd pick any that stand out. I said maybe the first one, Con Irwin Sub-Fund ever funded, which was called Women and Fire, and she said, that's the one that would stand out for me too. So anything that's a sort of demonstration project, Georgia, that can be applied afterwards as a way of doing things, expanding programs, expanding ways of working, expanding policy, that sort of thing is really good. So that was it was a project to encourage further participation by women in the CFA. And it was run with in a particular area of southeast Victoria. And so what it did a range of things. I'd looked at the barriers that there were some local people in the CFA there who were terrific and really interested. Women's participation in the fire services is low, very low, an area for expansion. So they looked at what the barriers were for women and set up various structures. I mean, a lot of it was basic sort of stuff like some mentoring about, how actually might you work your time. A lot of the people involved worked on farms. So a lot of women would support the household, look after kids, do the school drop-off, all that sort of stuff, and also work on the farm. So it was identifying structures like having other people come in to do some of those things while the woman could be freed up to be involved in the CFA. and be involved actually in the fighting and participating in that. And it was very successful. So that was one. Otherwise, Georgia, there's been a lot. I mean, one that I found really impressive, I remember going to one session with it. It was a program run through West Heidelberg Community Legal Centre, which was assisting women from different ethnic backgrounds with, this was a free program for them, through with different sorts of legal advice. So it was all sorts of things like how to access the medical system, how to learn to drive, how to, the session I went to was quite a lot about how there were women in that group whose children and family members were still in the country that they'd come from. So how to work through with the immigration department to do something about that. How to escape family violence if the person, the woman, as often happens, had come out with a partner and they needed to separate and they didn't see a way of keeping their access, their status in Australia, their citizenship in Australia still intact if they separated. So that sort of thing. It was a terrific project. What else? There's been some projects for funding women and children in the western suburbs, some direct funding for groups like First Steps to support women who need help fleeing domestic violence. And is that enough examples? I wish I had.
That is enough examples. Thinking along that vein, do you have any hopes for the future for women and girls?
Yes, Georgia. I mean, I suppose the hope is the same as it is for the Victorian Women's Trust, that women can achieve equality and equity, that they can be safe, that they can pursue all the opportunities that men have. Now, we have a fair way to go before doing that. And I think there is a particularly challenging time probably at the moment where the trust and the sort of work that they're funding their capacity to fund community groups can do because of the rise of a pretty toxic right wing in America and also here about women's role in society. And there's a long way to go for that. So my hope, and particularly in the last while, is that that's the sort of thing that the trust can keep on working on. And that can often be done through community groups. You know, that's where it's happening. That's where it's often going on. So to have to have funding rounds that do that is an important thing, I think. Yeah, so that would be my hopes. They're not small.
No.
But I also think that, you know, every time something happens, Georgia, like Conscious Combat program that enables women to, it gives help and hope going through that very difficult and then recovery time from family violence. It's not something I've experienced, but so I can only imagine, but is just really important. So it's really important for all those things.
And it's important for a ripple of reasons, right? So we talk about the way that we see women and girls in our society and their role is something as small as a woman comes to a kickboxing class, and I'm just thinking of someone in particular who loves doing show and tell during the week after she's learned. So she goes and shows everybody she knows the kickboxing techniques that she's just recently learned, right? And men see that, other women see that, and children see that. And that changes the way that men view women as being capable of being strong and fighting and learning things that are typically designated for men. It shows women what women are capable of, and it raises children with a different view of what gendered expectations are, right? There's so far-reaching consequences of one person learning one kick.
Yes, that's terrific. And that's a wider aim than I've thought about, Georgia. I've talked to someone I know who did experience violence from a partner in the past, and she talked about just how good it is, that feeling of claiming your body back, to being
Yes.
yours, and to being strong, and to being capable, and to doing things that traditionally women haven't always done. But that's a wider example, isn't it? And we still
Yeah.
do have those very gendered roles, and that's part of the whole wider equality and equity that the Trust works towards. And anyone who wants to have a look at the website for what the Trust does, it's vwt.org.au. There are a whole range of things that the Trust does under their different auspices, and that's a greater, wider thing that's exciting, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the Trust is absolutely incredible. Like I had actually been following this particular sub fund for years before we became a registered charity. When I first found it, I was like, this is a perfect thing for us to apply for, but we didn't qualify yet. And so I had conversations with Mary Crooks about like what options there were for non-charities. And we really worked hard to scrape together the money to pay for lawyers, to go through the process of becoming registered with the ACNC and everything that looked like. I think it was one of the first things that I was like, oh, we're going to be able to finally qualify and apply for the Con Irwin Sub-Fund, now that we've gotten all of the legalities out of the way with the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, the ACNC.
It's a bit of a performance, Georgia, I understand.
There's a lot of work that goes into it. And to be honest, like, it's not all bad. I think it's really positive to have a deadline every year to put out your reports, to have some accountability about what you're doing with your funding, and things of that nature are not so tedious. Some of the other bits and pieces can be a little bit more tedious, but the world is the world. But I think certainly after following the Trust for a long time and seeing the Con Irwin Sub-Fund was always the one that stood out to me as being the one that's so aligned with our values, that talking about just we're not going to achieve change doing things the way we've always done them, and sometimes it takes some bravery. The Conscious Combat Club was a brave step outside of a lot of ideas around like, oh, you couldn't teach women who've experienced violence combat sports because it's violent, and that they won't like it, and it's going to be too much for them, and just really taking away people's agency to make decisions for themselves around what that looks like and what they keep on returning to. It's something that has grown from year to year, and I can already tell you, having already awarded some scholarships, just how excited that women are to be able to get started into classes, the intersections in how that looks like. I've had women with disabilities, women with autism who hadn't been able to access programs like this, with other intersecting experiences of violence, and just how excited they are at the end of class to have been in a safe enough space to engage with community, to have done the kickboxing thing, shocked at the sound that they can make when they hit the pad, with the incredible power that already lies in their body and how it grows and grows week on week. It is just so wonderful. It is my like whenever I feel like the news is just telling me everything that's wrong with the world, like we are up against a very difficult time. And if you spend enough time on the internet, you'll really believe that everyone in the world is split into hating each other. And I think that the more time we can spend in community, the easier that is to manage, because it's just balanced out with realizing that in the world there's just so many beautiful souls, and the women that we work with, to me, that is why I love the work, because they're just really, really wonderful human beings who are so brilliant, just so powerful, and to be able to give people agency back it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Georgia. And I mean, that's exactly the sort of thing that I wanted to come out of Con Irwin. And that's where that thing of circuit breaking, in that, just listing off solutions to violence and promoting education and so on, is one thing, but the circuit breaking solution, as you're saying, that's something that, as far as I know, no one else is doing. And it obviously makes sense. And I love also, Georgia, you have this very strong emphasis on working with a whole range of women, trans women, women who are who have disabilities, all of that sort of thing, which I don't know, but it can go into the too hard category, can't it? So yeah, yes, that's terrific. And I didn't know, I don't know any of the background of you talking to Mary and saying what can we do and so on. So that's great. Yeah, but I love it that you've picked Con Irwin because some projects I've thought, and probably the funding subcommittee have thought too. Is that a really good fit? The Conscious Combat Scholarships is such a clear fit for Con Irwin. It's just, it's just spot on. So as soon as I saw it, apparently as soon as the finance subcommittee saw it, the board were happy. It was great. It was really good. So yeah. No,
it's so great. Fantastic. And for people who are listening, the scholarships are still open. Just go to our website and look up either of the programs. So we have a trans and gender diverse explicit program, and we have the women's program. You can access both of those programs depending on where you feel more comfortable. All trans women are welcome in our women's programs, but we understand that some people feel more comfortable in a community that feels more representative. And so that's why we do offer both programs in that respect. Those are open. You can access them. You just need to essentially let us know that you want to access them. We haven't set up any financing, rules where you need to show that you require the support of the scholarship. That was something for me that was really important as well, is not to make people have to jump through hoops to prove that they should be one of the 50 people. I think people who are struggling financially, and to be honest, a lot of people are at the moment because the economy, is a really difficult time. And I think
it's a difficult time for everyone. Yeah,
exactly. And so for me, that the more we can make things easier for people to access, we can reduce their barriers, the better. And finance is one aspect of what that work looks like. And of course, being intersectional and understanding the various identities that our communities come to us with is the other part of that. So yeah, it's just been thrilling to be able to say to people yes, we can support you, and you don't have to reach out and be so stressed about how much is this program going to cost me? Am I going to be able to do it? It is just so wonderful to be able to more broadly share the work that we've been building for the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's terrific, Georgia. I'm just so delighted. I mean, this is so good for me to hear what this sub-fund is doing, and my mother would have been delighted, as I've said to a few groups. I remember going to the West Heidelberg group, and we have booklets. I don't know if the trust is producing them at the moment, but just about the sub-fund area, and because of that particular group, they were talking about separation from family and how they could bring family out, and I was talking about the sub-fund, and they were talking about what they were doing and so on, and I just being able to hold up this booklet which has a picture of my mother on the front and say, "This is my mother. I know how you feel." Was wonderful. It was just really wonderful. Yeah, it's a special thing I remember from that. So it's very rewarding for those who give to sub-funds as well. Georgia, you had a question about how people
support the fund. Exactly. I don't even know how funds work. Do you just donate to the Vic Women's Trust, or can you donate to the fund directly?
Yeah, you can donate to the fund directly, and anyone can donate to any of the 17 funds directly. One thing I should have done before talking to you is check the website, but I assume all the details of the sub-funds are up there. So any donations to specific sub-funds, including Con Irwin, Georgia, the contact is Mary. So for donations, so it's Mary Crooks it's Mary at vwt.org.au. So,
Yep.
and that applies to all the sub-funds. Yep, and donations are welcome. There's no charge for people who set up sub-funds, so the trust does it as something that they do. And the good thing about the sub-funds is that there's the vast majority of the part of the fund that goes to each particular program each year, or two programs if there's enough money from the sub fund to do that. There's a small part that stays in that sub fund program to grow the sub funds, so that's in perpetuity thing. So I don't have to keep donating. No one else has to keep donating. But of course, if there are donations, we can do much more. So
Exactly.
so that is that's sorry, George, I was pick up a glass. So that's terrific.
No, absolutely. And we can pop all of the details for folks who might be interested in donating to the sub fund into the show notes here so they can have a look there, including the details to explore the website of the Victorian Women's Trust, which I highly recommend. I feel like the trust is always at the forefront of important things, important change that is happening in our society. And so for me personally, that's why I love to stay connected with the trust and to find out how we can get involved again at a community level in shaping change, whether that was, the trust was heavily involved with the vote to amend the Constitution to bring the voice, which was of course heartbreaking, but the trust was very involved in things of that nature and very much takes an intersectional approach to women and girls' role in society. And so they're very good to follow for that reason as well.
That's right. And that's a terrific thing to say and to let people know. That's why I'm a donor. That's why I do some volunteer work. I'm still working part-time, but, that's where my stimulation comes from. And so that's absolutely right. They are at the forefront. They are also, Georgia, always, and particularly at the moment, actually, it's they're just having a burst of fundraising to generally raise funds to keep the trust sustainable into the future, and that's always a battle. So anyone who wants to talk about that, of course, would talk with Mary. Yeah, I know we're talking about sub-funds specifically, so I won't go into that, but it's always difficult to keep. The trust is entirely independent, and for all those years, it has been funded by women and some men in the community. So, yeah, it's always something that is there that has to be done. And particularly at the moment, actually. Yep. So anyone who has a look and thinks it's a worthy cause, please do get in touch with Mary. It would be incredibly valuable. That's aside from the sub-funds.
Yes. Yeah, which really all falls under the one umbrella. But now I'm thinking about your spare time and your activities and whatnot. And I mean, like, what does that look like for sport? Hilary, is there any kickboxing on your horizons potentially?
Well, it'd be a lot of fun. There's not at the moment. And yeah, I mean, it would be this whole getting older business, Georgia, and building up strength and building up body strength and building up bones and so on.
Bone density, kickboxing's excellent for bone density.
Right. Okay. At the moment, I do a couple of sessions a week of Pilates, which is also good because it's that. Yep. And other than that, no sport unless you include gardening, which is not. I wouldn't include gardening as a sport.
Not a sport, but just as much dedication.
Yeah, but that's interesting. That sort of thing of using your body and feeling powerful within your body, particularly as you age, I think, Georgia, is an interesting one. Yeah. You don't run general programs, do you, for people? This is
Well,
conscious.
Conscious
This is
Combat Club runs
yeah,
programs
yeah.
this is a really important point, right? Is that we really live in a time where we do need to distinguish this is a trauma-informed program, but
Yes.
it's a very subjective thing, right? And I think it would be hard not to make a case that most women in society have dealt with some sorts of adversity, right?
Absolutely.
When we
Absolutely.
say trauma informed, we really mean person centered. So, who is a person in front of me, and what things do I need to do to make this program accessible for them? And so, there are some specific things that we do that are informed by our knowledge of how trauma works, but anyone can benefit from those. So, when we talk about them at a practical level, inviting people to notice sensations in their body, helping them to feel where there's fatigue in their shoulders and their legs, and how that translates to checking in with our bodies and being able to notice, am I feeling overwhelmed? What's my body calling for? Do I need more rest? All things that I think everybody, and particularly women, need extra help with, because we're often pushed through a lot of things. And certainly there's been a lot of conditioning around that, right? Then choice. So rather than telling people what to do in sport-based settings, inviting them to try things. I think everybody does better when they get to have agency over how they want to engage with the practice, because we're not linear beings either. So what I did last week doesn't inform 100% what I'm capable of this week, because I could be more tired or more stressed or experiencing other things in my life, right? Then skills like how we regulate our emotions in response to stress, so practicing bringing our heart rate up and bringing it down, everyone can benefit from being able to do that, because we all encounter stress. And so, we predominantly exist to support victim survivors, but I've never turned anyone away saying you don't have enough trauma to come into our space. So anyone who wants to pay to join our programs can absolutely do so. And you would be very welcome to just come into a class, because we would love to also have you experience firsthand what it is like to work with one of our communities and to see what it's like. So you're very, very welcome anytime.
Georgia, I would love to do that, because thank you. And I will take you up on that if I could, because one of the satisfying things, and there's so much that is satisfying about being lucky enough to be able to donate, as I was lucky enough to be able to set up this sub-fund, is really seeing what happens. It's so satisfying. It's actually good for you. I mean, it actually is apparently measurably good for you to feel that feeling of satisfaction of seeing how people are benefiting out of things, and I'd love to. And when you were talking about what kickboxing offers, I mean, there's so many things that just apply to people, but specifically women in general. I think the regulating stress, the dealing with the stuff out there that can be less than positive, all that sort of thing. It's terrific. Yeah. I was thinking of yoga, which I did for some period of time, which I found really useful for that too. That's a different sort of thing. But yeah.
Oh, they're different, but within the same family.
Can I come along as a first step?
Yes, of course you can. We will talk outside of this about which night is going to be most suitable, some time to prepare. We can do an initial consult, talk you through exactly what a class looks like, start to finish. We'll get you a set of Conscious Combat Club hand wraps that you can take away with you afterwards and display somewhere in your home if you would like to, as a memento for the work that you've supported. Absolutely. I would love that.
Yeah, sure would, because a lot of what I do, apart from Con Irwin, is just, I mean, I love doing that, Georgia. I think anyone who's had contact with the trust, so apart from a few haters, but just see how good it is, see what the quality of programs and initiatives, you would know about this, you're familiar with the website, that they do. And so, I think those of us who are connected to the trust, it's a pleasure to display things that are part of the exciting things that the trust has contributed to. And you're the ones who do it, but love to.
Absolutely. We'll make it happen. Hilary, is there anything else you'd like to share with our community? It's typically mostly people in martial arts, skewed to a lot of women, but is there any final things you would like to share with the world through our quite small platform?
Okay. I don't think so, Georgia, except, look, I think what is important, you talked about the need to be positive, and the need to, and this ties in with, I would imagine, what kickboxing does too, to combat that feeling of things are awful in the world. And I think just an important thing, we can easily talk about things not being good at the moment, but there is progress being made. There are things happening. I can remember when the Victorian Women's Trust produced The Trap.
Yes, The Trap is excellent.
It's terrific. It's groundbreaking, to use the word. A series of 10 podcasts with Jess Hill, who wrote See What You Made Me Do, against aspects of violence against women and how it fits in with society. And I remember meeting a group of people who were involved in the trust. It was actually when they moved to their new office, and these were the guys who were doing the fit out for the trust. And they had a look at The Trap, which was at that stage, I think, in production or had just been produced or so on. And their reaction of, it was so powerful, Georgia, because their reaction of, I never knew about this. I never knew what happened, and horror, and okay, these are things I can do if I see blokes doing things in my circle that are not acceptable. These are things that I need to know about in my community. That is so positive and so powerful.
Yeah.
So the main thing is we don't give up and we keep doing good stuff that works towards things. I wouldn't like to estimate how many people's lives have been changed by The Trap, but I think it's probably considerable. And the trust needs to be able to go on doing those sorts of things. So that's just an example. Yeah.
Here.
We've got to keep doing that. Yeah, all of us. You're doing it. We're all doing it. Lots of women are doing it. So we're not alone, which is good.
Just like basically anything is, in my humble opinion. Well, Hilary, thank you so much for giving up your time, for establishing the Con Irwin Sub-Fund, for all of the work that you've done over the last at least 2 decades. And it sounds like probably even before establishing the trust. Thank you for being a lifelong dedicated feminist and change maker.
Thank you, Georgia. That's lovely. And may I say, it's so lovely to talk to women with the same feeling, the same ideas. A lot of people have them, but this is a lovely conversation, has been a lovely conversation on all sorts of levels. So thank you for your wisdom and what you're doing. And it's just great that it tied in so well with Con Irwin. I'm delighted. Thanks.
Thank you for being part of the club. We'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch, please refer to the information in the show notes. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider leaving us a review or subscribing on whichever platforms you use to listen or watch the podcast. The Conscious Combat Club acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands in which we work, live and play. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. We'd like to say thank you to Nari for the beautiful song Shape Me, heard at the beginning and end of every episode. If you'd like to connect with Nari, you can find her on Instagram at Nari the Saga.
Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight above his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. meets. We're so glad you came, and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body, hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well, take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well, now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2, I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny for my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?